Hey guys, welcome to Taste of Recovery, the podcast.
Where we explore one's honest journey of surrender, willingness, acceptance, and courage.
I'm Alicia Spenlove.
And I'm Eden Sassoon.
Please join us every week for authentic and raw conversations with inspiring people in recovery.
We invite you and our guests to get real because the disease of addiction does not discriminate.
Oh, no, it doesn't. And we go through so many emotions. We laugh, we cry, we pray.
So get ready for a taste of recovery.
Find me somebody who says they're not broken, and I will show you the biggest broken person you've ever met.
What a pleasure to have Matthew in the studio today.
Enjoy his taste of recovery.
How do I get here? I'll start with my what was my rock bottom. Like that started me to get to this journey here, and I'll go back and forth. I clearly had trauma. I was masking it. I was escaping from it, and it was always there. The trauma was always there. I knew, when I go back and I kind of unlock that and I give into God and give into the higher power, it's like, it was always there. And I knew it was there, but I never talked to it. And as it started coming up, I started to push it back further and further to the point where it disappeared, not knowing what it was anymore, fully disassociated from it, but drank. And I drank all through, college and all that. To a really detrimental amount, right? Not just your college try. Like I went above and beyond, and came home, back to my parents' house, trying to get my shit together. Life moved on, did great. Really didn't drink. Then started drinking again, heavily. Then it went away. Got married. While I was engaged, my drinking ramped up. That trauma came flooding back, and the memory that I had suppressed for years popped up, like smacked me in the face. And it just took a downward spiral from there. Had bits and pieces where I wasn't drinking heavily to my heaviest. But as it ramped up, we got married, we had a kid, and a year and a bit into it, it just so bad. To the point where, like, even before we had our son, I was probably at that point in time, I was gearing up to being maybe a 3 or 4 day a week blackout drinker. And then and all day, like it was awful. And then my rock bottom was knowing that I was going to quit. Like I couldn't live this life anymore. I couldn't be drinking all day long. We had a business together, my wife and I. We were in the fitness industry. As a trainer, I was still waking up at 4 a.m, but I'd be drinking by probably 7 or 8 in the morning.
How did you do that? How did you get up after drinking?
Not easily, but I just became what I did. And it was just that routine. And again, I'm assuming I don't know what time I fell asleep at, right? So I don't know if it was between 9 and midnight or 2 in the morning. I don't know.
Do you call that falling asleep or passing out?
I would definitely call that passing out. When I finally had that last night, and you read about the ugly stories, especially the celebrities or people we may have known who go to rehab, they had their one last night out, and that's when they die. Like that's when they I just need one more big night out, then I'm going to go for help. And I knew, I was like, I went to the bar that I always went to. The bartender was like, "You're not driving home. Leave your car, taking your keys." Somebody else drove me home. We had a nanny. You can go. You're done for the day. I'll take care of our son. All good. I remember I woke up on the kitchen floor. My wife was staring down at me. And the first thought I had was, oh my God. Not because the look of anger and hatred and fear and everything she had in her eyes, plus the smoke coming out of her ears. That wasn't the oh my God. It was, I remembered giving our son a bath, but I had no memory of putting him to bed. So I popped up, ran to the bathroom, checked the bathtub to make sure he wasn't in there. And empty, he wasn't there, ran to his room. He was fast asleep. And that was it. That was as far, I play that back in my head as I tell it, and that moment, it could have gone any split second decision away from not having a son. Right. And that was my moment. The next day, went to get the car. My wife was not, we weren't talking. We were going away on a family trip 4 days later. So we were off to Jamaica for 8 days to an all-inclusive resort. And all she wanted to do was leave me. Rightfully so. And we did this family vacation together. You look at pictures of us, there's none of us together. It's awful. And then I went to a program once a week. It wasn't AA, but it was a program I wanted to get into, an inpatient program. And I did that program weekly, begging, like they were so filled up to get into an inpatient program. I wasn't drinking, right? I mean, having that rock bottom, having the fact that my life could have changed, everybody's life could have changed drastically, was my motivation to not drink. Hard. Those first 4 days, like walking through the house with my hands shaking. Like this is the first time I didn't have alcohol in my system for years. Like nothing. We got into a program in February. So it took about 2 months to get into a program, the one that I wanted to get into. And because nothing's done easy, and we talked about this last week, nothing's done easy, I got permission to live out of the live-in program. So because I had a business, and selfishly, I wanted to be home every single night to make sure that my wife and my kid were there. Like it was pure selfish reasons to not want. I used the whole I have a business excuse. It was selfish because, let's be honest, at the time I was drinking heavily. I was selfish. There was nothing that wasn't about me. You know, and I remember it was the Sunday before I went into rehab that my wife looked at me and said, she said, just so you know, we may not be here when you get out. And I looked at her, completely selfish moment that I'm proud of, where I said, I understand that, and I will understand if you're not. But you need to know I'm not doing this for you. I have to do this for me. And that was the biggest one. And yeah, looking back 18 years later, this is 18 years ago now, right? Like literally 18 years and 2 weeks was when I got out of rehab.
Did you stopped drinking?
I did.
Wow.
I did. So the program itself was an eye-opener because I learned a lot, I purposely didn't want to go to a program that was, high life and surrounded by people of a certain stature. And I wanted to go somewhere that was going to kind of ground me and humble me. And so I went to a public program, and I looked at what I had, and then I'm learning about people who were relapsing just so they can get a roof over their head and 3 square meals a day for 21 days. That's like, that wasn't my world.
Right.
So, and it was a mixed bag. It was people in my group. It was a men's group where there were heroin addicts, there were meth addicts. Like we went through this circle of 10 or 11 of us and saying what they did. And I'm like, I was the last guy to go. I think there were 2 other drinkers in the group. And I'm like, I feel like such a loser. I just drank. I'm like, you woke up with a needle out of your arm. I'm like, I just drank. And one of the guys looks at me and goes, but you drank every day, all day. That's insane. So it was like, what do you mean? But you did this. I'm like, yeah, but you drank nonstop. Like you were always drunk. So that was, the motivation again to stay not drinking, because I had that rock bottom. I used to think telling my story wasn't important because I didn't have any DUIs. I was never in prison. I never went to jail for the night. There were all these things I didn't do.
Right, but what about the trauma that came back to you? Were you able to work through it when you were there?
Yeah, not while I was there. The trauma was sexual assault, sexual molestation. And again, it's year like this took place in like what I'm going to say now, 5 years ago. Just thinking back to what I went through when I was younger. I remember when I was about 11 years old, scream I wanted to kill myself. I had no idea why. Why would an 11-year-old? No idea. It was hard. You know, it was always there, but I disassociated from. Well, I didn't know it. I didn't remember it for years. Then I got in my 20s. I kind of recall it. I disassociated from it. It was a sibling, and
so it wasn't an adult.
No.
Mm-hmm.
There's about a 6.5-year difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So, it happened when I was about 9.
Don't you feel like a lot of people don't talk about that? They talk more about when an adult molests a child, not when another child molests a child or friend. It's
right.
Sibling. It's heartbreaking, but I think it happens more times than anybody ever wants to admit. Yes.
It happens a lot more. And there's so much that played into it, so it was, I played it back over the years. Like once I got rehab and started seeing a therapist properly, because, my marriage had problems, obviously, because I was drinking. And we went to counseling, the two of us, and I lied all the way through it. And I was probably drunk through most of it with our baby in the bucket sitting there, marriage counseling. And finally, my wife looked at our therapist and, she goes, he lies the entire time he's here. He's just lying to you nonstop. She stopped going, but I continued.
That's great that you kept continuing.
I kept on going. I knew I needed the help, but I also knew I had to stop drinking. So I actually went to rehab. I went to therapy with her for like 6 months with this one therapist. Then I went to rehab. Right. So I had been drinking and lying to this therapist the entire time. And it was when I came out that we really worked on my trauma. And, the trigger was that sister turning around and doing something that had to do with my wedding. And it was like, I snapped. It was, you're taking something from me again. Like it was really like that guttural, you took from me before. I'm not letting, and I didn't know what it was. Like I snapped at like, you're not taking this from me too. Those were the exact words I said. You're not taking from this from me too. And I went outside. We were supposed to have dinner at my parents' house, and I went outside, and I sat down, and it rushed. It was like watching those like flashback scenes from a movie. Everything came like in a flashback, like from side to side, like, oh my God. And I went to the bar, right to the bar. Like, I am not remembering this. Yeah. And then my wife came, and fiance at the time, and she's like, tell me. Now remember, I just remembered all this happened. And I'm hearing, tell me. She's just being caring. I'll be honest with you. There is nobody who is prepared to have their future spouse turn to them and dump on them what I did. Like, that's like, it definitely started things off on a sour note. But understandable. And then when I eventually told my parents the reaction, and again, I don't know how I would react if I was a parent hearing this, but the reaction came down to, there's no way.
Like, there was no way. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm in shock. This was like, no, son,
right,
I don't believe that she, right.
No way. And it took a long time to talk through that. And I did EMDR for therapy. That was a big part of my recovery. And I really learned on I leaned on knowing why. right? Knowing why I was drinking, I've yet to meet somebody who has been an addict of some sort, who didn't have a trauma somewhere in their life. So when I came to rehab and worked with this therapist through EMDR and talking it through. And I remember her saying to me, and we worked a long time, a very, very long time on, trust issues, and again, playing it back on like every girlfriend was never good enough in my house. And like, there was so much that I had to work on. And then my therapist looked at me and she said, well, what do you want out of this? If you were to confront this person, what do you want? Do you want an apology? And I said, well, I say probably 6 months for me to figure out that all I wanted was acknowledgement. That was it. I just need them to acknowledge what happened. I don't want an apology. I don't care for the apology. It was just, I want that acknowledgement. And I actually got that probably about 5 years ago. We didn't talk for a long time, and off and on here and there, we would try and get relationships back together again. And that never worked out well. And then we kind of did holidays together, family things here and there, just for a little while. And one night, everybody got into bed and she wouldn't leave. And she's like, we started talking. I remember I was sitting on the kitchen counter while she was across the room. It was funny, my wife actually said to me, she goes, whenever you are around the two of you, even though she's older than I am, she goes, you always take a higher stance. You either stand on a step or you kneel on something. So she goes, you're already taller, but you always make yourself even taller. Mm. So going and sitting on the kitchen counter, so I'm even higher. And there was finally that acknowledgement. And I looked at her and I said, thank you. And she started walking and I said, no. Well, this is not a hugging moment. This is thank you. And that's all this is going to be. And that was it was a big moment I remember telling my wife the next day, she's like, there was acknowledgement. I'm like, yeah. She said, what did you do? Like, oh my God. Because we had never talked about what would you do. I talked about it with my therapist because I also didn't think that was ever going to happen. And then it didn't erase it. It just made it, I got what I wanted. I got the acknowledgement. And that was probably the hardest part, where even today, last year, it was my youngest, it was his bar mitzvah, and we invited the whole family just for a simple morning service on a Thursday morning, invited the whole family, invited them. And afterwards I got a text saying, hey, it was great to see everybody. Our kids don't really know each other, even though they're all older. It'd be great if we can, maybe do Father's Day together. And I came back saying, hey, thank you so much. You know what? We don't really do much for Father's Day. It's just barbecue. I do it. That's it. And then came, what I'm really saying is I'd really love to have a friendship. And I'll tell you, if it happened 5 years earlier, oh my God, yes, come back in my life. Because that's, what I always wanted. And they came back with, not right now, but thanks. And it was so empowering where I didn't need it. I didn't need it. And there's a lot more. I've got so many layers and chapters, it's not even funny.
But it sounds right there like that's a lot of self-acceptance and then this boundary. Like when someone's walking towards you in a moment like that, I know that probably I would have been like, oh, you were like,
yeah,
no, this isn't.
That was my first boundary. That was my very first boundary.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these boundaries, this idea of like patience and boundaries and self-acceptance, this was all talked about in therapy?
Not even the boundaries. Boundaries were never talked about. Just it was getting over it, EMDR to compartmentalize it and be able to move on from it. But I never had boundaries. Boundaries were not part of my life.
Right. So what enabled you, what brought you to that space of finding that boundary in a moment like that, which was your one trauma that sort of triggered a lot at this stage? Like, I know what I would call it, but like, what is that to you? How did it?
It was almost like it gave me the ability to close that door, that chapter was done. It no longer held power over me. That was the biggest one. It no longer held the power over what I needed. Now, there's a lot more. I grew up in a family. My parents couldn't have kids, so all three of us were adopted. So at the same time, just to really play into this, I never cared to find my birth family ever. It was never a part of my plan. But my middle son is blonde hair, blue eyed, and can catch fire if he goes out in the sun for too long, and the rest of us aren't. So he would get me close to finding out. And finally, I did a year before this all happened at one of those DNA kits. And I found my maternal family. And then it turns out I have a half sister. Not that I never cared. I never cared to know about any part of my heritage, my bloodline, anything. But I think part of that also was that I felt when I got that sense of acknowledgement, I had another piece of my empty puzzle. It was almost, and I say this with, respect to everybody, because I love my mother, who passed away years ago. I love her, my father, they're still my family. It doesn't change anything. It was like finding money in your pocket you forgot you had. It was always there, but I haven't worn those jeans in 6 months. It was just extra. And it completed me. I hate saying that phrase, but my wife pointed it to me. She goes, since you found this family, you are different. And that's when I got that acknowledgement shortly after that.
So on your maternal mother's side, you met your half-sister. And who else did you meet?
So I met my half-sister is Australian. And she was born and raised in Australia.
Wow.
Yes, my birth mother. I got to say that I woke up with an email New Year's Day that changed my life, saying, hey, based on this website, we're related. And so our birth mother was from Scotland, and her mother passed away when she was young, and they moved off to Australia to start new. And our birth mother was 15 when she had my sister in Australia. And about 5 years later, she moved to Canada. And then 5 years after that, she moved back to Scotland. I was the fifth year. She had me in Canada and gave it for adoption and flew off back to Scotland. So I met my half-sister. I've met the aunt of my birth mother. She's still alive. She's 85 now. Her and her daughter, so my cousin, flew from Scotland to meet me.
Oh.
So it just gave a whole, it completed something that I didn't know I needed to know because I never cared to know, but it definitely completed something. It filled a void that I didn't have, that I didn't know I had. Again, after my trauma, I remember I can feel it going down that very first drink I ever had. Right, I was 12 years old, and I had half a shot of rye, and it felt warm. It felt so good. It didn't make me go steal from my parents' liquor cabinet, but I knew right then and there that I liked this.
Mm, yeah,
and I liked how it made me feel. Right, and that was my first inclination when looking back. That I know that it definitely was going to lead to something. And once I realized that it could make me feel good and take me away, that's where I went with it. And it was my opportunity to escape and leave it.
We in the 12 steps in AA, we go through our fourth step in our sex inventory, and that's where I'm at now. And there's a lot of stuff that will be coming up that is part playing doctor and part I don't know where the lines cross, and nothing that I hold on to or resentful or as a problem because I was just as much as involved as the person present. So it's interesting, where you can handle the trauma in a therapist's office, or you can really handle the trauma in doing the work yourself. Just for those that listening, there's many different ways to
so many different paths
attack the idea or issue of trauma.
Yeah, I did EMDR as well, to help with my trauma, and it was really, really helpful.
Explain, you guys, because people might hear EMDR and they're like, wait, well, I don't get it. What's going on? Granted, you could nowadays Google it, but.
Yeah. But before we talk about EMDR, I want to say that acknowledgement, I agree, is huge. Just the acknowledgement. Because so many people live in denial. It's a secret. Oh my God, I don't want to expose my family. This can't get out to other people. I mean, it's just always kept in, and it's the shame that we live in for years and the pain. And when you were having those feelings of suicide at 11 years old, that is real. What is going on? What happened? No, did you tell your parents that you wanted to kill yourself when you were 11?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I bet they were freaking out. Like, what?
Off to a therapist. Mm-hmm. Off to a psychiatrist, right? Like, I look back and it was the late 70s, early 80s. This is what, that was the answer. Just go see it. Go to a psychiatrist. And it was funny. I had severe anxiety, depression. I wouldn't say I had suicidal ideations. I wasn't thinking ways to do it. I mean, my core memories are much different than other people's core memories. My core memory is literally collapsing on the floor, banging the floor, hitting it, saying, I want to die. Not knowing why, like literally not knowing why. It's hard. And on the flip side of that, during COVID, my oldest went through some severe mental health issues. And because of what I went through, and my wife, her previous job for Brokenness Fitness, was a social worker. We are lucky, and we have been told this by every specialist we saw, that we were so lucky that we have such an open, talkative home, because most kids, you find out that they are hurting themselves or have intrusive thoughts, we find out way too late.
Yeah.
So having those conversations, and a lot of people talk about that our addiction becomes our superpower. I really do think that everything I went through has helped me to help other people. I used to say, I went through it all, so you don't have to. Acknowledging all of that and knowing that it's there, and knowing that all that I went through, the anxiety, the suicidal stuff, wanting to die and not knowing why to die. It actually, again, things I didn't love going to see a psychiatrist. And I never talked about what had happened to me, because again, you didn't talk about that stuff. Nobody was going to believe me anyway. I actually, he gave me a tool. Remember that game? It was a board game, but it wasn't really a board game, called Labyrinth, where you had two little dials and there was a maze with a ball. You had to get it through. We would play that to work on my anxiety when I was 11 years old. And it's funny, we actually have a version of it here in the house, because that's actually now when I'm anxious, what I go to.
Right.
I love that.
Right. And then getting back to the EMDR, how did that?
Yeah, quick, just so those listening can kind of relate or maybe be interested in, who knows, trying it.
Yeah. So helped me to such a level where it taught me how to handle certain situations of anxiety now, where if I'm having a conversation with somebody and it's getting out of hand, it's getting very heated, I'll close my eyes and I'll go to that place that I did then. And it's so, if you're having a conversation with me and where it's getting heated and I close my eyes, you're probably going to get pissed off. Because I'm not looking at you. I'm barely listening to you, because I need to pass through right to that compartment. I'm not letting myself hold this anymore. That's a big one.
That's beautiful.
I felt that I was broken. I was the one who was wrong. I let this happen to me. I chose to drink to deal with it. Women or drinking. That was my two ways to deal with the trauma I had. And it's, when we talk about trauma now, trauma is such a big trigger word.
acknowledging the trauma, right? And then when you say handle it better than others means that there's an action that we have to take to be able to handle that. And so I heard obviously the way, whether it be cold plunges, EMDR, therapy, like what are other ways that you handle traumas when they arise?
The biggest ones I go through is try to find a way to understand it. So my biggest thing is understand that it wasn't, number one, it happened to me. I didn't create it. So I'm not going to blame it. I'm not putting blame on people. And I understand this, person who did it to me had her own issues, her own trauma, I kind of go along the phrase of hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm. So it's like acceptance and then responsibility. What's your responsibility in it?
Yeah, my responsibility in it is moving forward from it. Because again, I was a child. I didn't do it. When I drank and when I used, it was to avoid that feeling.
How is your life today? Like with your kids, with your work?
Amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. With being sober, like how are you helping people?
That's the best part. The sobriety part of it is the best part. And I don't regret anything I've done. Again, there's different paths that for everybody, right? Yeah. There's AA, there's rehab, there's hypnosis. There's so many things we can do without knowing I did 12 steps. I did 12 steps, right? If you want to have a lot of fun, look at the 12 steps and right next to it, just write out what the 12 steps are, and then write down next to those 12 steps, the 12, and there are 12 stages of a hero's journey.
That's awesome.
And they pretty much align perfectly with the 12 steps of AA. So I look at AA or anything else we does, we're all on our hero's journey, right? Mm-hmm. And that rebirth is huge, right? And that rebirth doesn't really come out in the hero's journey until about the 10th, I think it's step 10. The 10th phase of your journey is a rebirth. So
when you say a hero's journey, is that, can you tell us, do we Google it or what? Tell me about it.
So hero's journey is what every mythology is based on the hero's journey. Modern hero journey would be the story of Star Wars or Harry Potter. Harry Potter is a hero's journey. He starts off as an orphan who's being treated poorly, and then he gets taken away. He's then mentored by somebody. And there's that whole, they go through the journey, and then he has that rebirth near the end of the story, but that's not the end. There's always more. And then, so I look at somebody who goes through recovery as we have a hero's journey. That's our journey. Mm-hmm. And we look back, and that's why I don't feel bad about anything that's happened in the past, because that was part of my journey. When I got sober, nobody knew. Nobody knew I went to rehab. Nobody knew that I stopped drinking. It was 18 years ago. There was still a huge, don't talk about it. That stigma. And the stigma's still there, but not like it was back then. Nobody recovered out loud. I didn't tell anybody for 10 years. So my sobriety at first was just mine. Mine, my wife's, my parents knew. So imagine, being an alcoholic, and nobody knew that I drank the way I drank. Even though I drank, but not the way they didn't know I had a problem. So carrying that secret for years and then carrying a secret of being sober for 10 years wasn't the easiest. At the time, I was a contributor to the Huffington Post, writing fitness articles. And I emailed the editor. I said, hey, I got this recovery story. Would it be cool if I shared it? They're like, yeah. So I wrote my story. And right before I sent it off to the editor, I said, are you sure? Because once you send that out, it's never coming back. And I went, send.
Yay.
It was published 3 hours later. And I went to school pickup. And this is where things started to change. And this is where things really got good. Because of that process of when I got sober, we had our own business. 6 years later, we closed the business. It's not like everything was perfect once I got sober. I was just sober. Real shit still happened.
Yeah.
And then once I sent that article out, I went to school pickup, and another mother came up behind me, literally just kind of like quietly sidled up beside me and said, "Hey, I read your article. Do you think I can email you later? I have a couple of questions." It was literally within an hour of it being posted that the first approach I got. And I came home like bouncing on, oh my God, my story, like people are coming out to me. This is weird. And then that went on for a few years. And I started talking about it more. And then really, I'm going to be honest on that. I think I should have looked for more support. I think things would have been a little bit differently. But once COVID hit, and I started hearing, and people knew my story, but I started hearing, reading about, I can't go to the restaurant, I can't go to the gym, but I can go to the liquor store, right? And I'm like, but yes, because as a guy who drank, I don't know if I would have been able to handle drinking every day and then suddenly taking away my liquor like that. And so I started talking more and more through COVID, really learning more. Then I got certified as a recovery coach. And then taking it and really talking about it openly and trying to help more people and understand that, like I learned through, COVID, long-term recovery was a thing. I get to be somebody who's been there, done that, and understand, again, learning, as I work with my clients now, I'll tell them the hardest part yes, you've been clean for 6 months. It's amazing. But you're going to have those days where you feel it and that memory comes up, and then we just talked about that emotion comes up. Sit through it. You got to face it. It's so hard. You got to just give up and face it and know it's going to go away. It's not there forever, and it doesn't transport you back to that exact moment. It's a feeling. And the more you have that feeling, the more you get used to it. So things have gone great. And since then, just wrote, put a book out about steps to recovery, overcoming addiction. I put that out. I'm now writing a book about my story and how to recover and all the things that we can do to kind of, really make a difference and understand. I don't know if you guys are familiar with kintsugi. You heard of kintsugi?
Oh, yes, yes. I love it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Looks like the thing behind us.
Look, the thing behind us. We're all broken.
Oh yeah, you can repair me with so much gold. And I'm more valuable and more beautiful because I'm broken, right?
Right. And find me somebody who says they're not broken, and I will show you the biggest broken person you've ever met. Right? We're all broken. Mm-hmm. We all have something. Life has been great. Ups and downs, roller coaster. It's not a straight line. Mm-hmm. I'm still and will always be one drink away from a relapse. Mm-hmm. Right? That's a big one. But we talk about it in our house and we joke about it in our house. And we, when I was year 16, that's really when I came out about it. And my kids were now teenagers. Or my youngest was almost a teenager. But I'm like, you know what? Social media, we're going to TikTok this thing. And I had t-shirts printed that everybody in the family wore. And it was Sober AF season 16.
I love it.
We just had the best time with it. And I remember my middle one saying, Dad, I know what we should do. For your 16th sober birthday, we should go on a pub crawl.
We should what?
A pub crawl? I love that.
And I was like, what? He said, it's perfect. You'll drive. So we joke, there's those jokes about it where we can laugh about it and I can tell some of the things that happened. I've got a son, my oldest one's in his second year university. So all of his friends are open with me about it. They talk about it. My youngest one will go, they have these underage Halloween parties and Valentine's Day parties that they go to. We're not stupid. They're going to go through the same things we all did. Mm-hmm. So this is a hard one for me. And so here we are in trying to navigate 2024 with what they got. And I'll be honest with you. I will take what we all went through any day compared to what our kids have to navigate nowadays, because I couldn't do it.
But it's great that you're building this community and that you're healthy and you work out
and that you speak out. Yeah, you speak out loud and represent it.
It's if again.
And with your podcast, you got to tell us about your podcast too.
Yeah. So I talk to you about rising up, about things that happen after recovery, because we hear so many stories. Nobody talks about all the awesome things that happen after recovery. I have a t-shirt that I printed up that said, everything addiction, sobriety offers everything addiction promised. Right. And it's a huge, I'll say to anybody who's looking, if they're listening to this and they're not in recovery and they're thinking about what they should do or they're questioning it, try out as many things as possible. If you're going to meetings, try 12 different places. Unless the very first one you find is the best, you connect, but you may not connect, right? If you don't connect with that one, try another one. Try another one. Try this one. Go here. Talk to so-and-so. Go to a church. Talk to your preacher. Talk to your mom. Talk to your rabbi. Just talk to somebody. The biggest thing that we've learned, and we know this now, if you've read any of Johann Hari's books, the opposite of addiction is connection, right? So talking to people, going to meetings where there are people. And I'd say that the meetings I went to, they probably had 4 or 5 people. That wasn't connection, right? That was 4 or 5 people that were wasn't what I needed, right? There are so many things out there. So just look around and talk, and there's no shame in what we like. I hate the word shame. There's no shame in anything we've done. Shit, we've done it. I'll guarantee you, as bad as I think I've done something, there's 100 people who've done a hell of a lot worse. And those 100 people, there's people who've done other things. There's so much out there, and they're just feelings, and we can do so much better. And by talking about it, recovering out loud. I love the fact that as we recover out loud, the reason why I do recover out loud now, 18 years later, is I'm trying to help somebody who's recovering silently.
Yeah. Also Eden and I were talking about it because it's such a different world today. I think some people aren't going to have that inclination right away. Well, maybe I should go check out AA, or there's some sort of stigma, but it's great. They could turn on your podcast. They could find you on social media. And because you're recovering out loud, you're just helping so many people that otherwise would be sitting in their bedrooms shriveling and picking up that drug or that drink. But, you can inspire them right from their bedroom. You found your purpose. You found your purpose, You
wake up not hungover.
Yeah.
It's fuck, this is awesome. Going and doing whatever you want, sitting down there and having a cup of coffee and enjoying.
Yeah.
And not thinking you're going to throw up after you're having coffee. There's or just don't touch me vibes. Whole, we get to live. I don't like the phrase, life is short. Because it really isn't. We have a long fucking time here. In the grand scheme of the universe, life is it's nothing. But if you think back to, I think back 20 years ago, it might seem like yesterday, but that was 20 fucking years ago. It was a long time ago. Make the most out of every day we've got, because we only get one chance at it. There's only one game. Enjoy the hell of it.
Yes.
I want to live here as long as I possibly can, because clearly what's after is so fucking awesome. No one's come back from it. But you know what? I'm good to stay here right now so I can bring as many memories of here to wherever's next.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope these stories have touched your hearts and left you with a newfound appreciation for the incredible strength within us all.
And if you found our podcast to be a source of inspiration, we'd be extremely grateful if you could take a moment to rate and review us.
Yes, review us.
Your support helps us reach more people on the path to recovery.
And while you're at it, hit that follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Remember, you're not alone. One day at a time, we got this.